That's Lynn Martin, Bob Iger, and Mickey and Minnie ringing the opening bell. Trading is underway on this Thursday, and I want to bring in Seth Schachner, Seth Schachner. He's managing director at Strat Americas. Seth, thanks so much for rejoining us. You were talking about really so many success stories for Disney, but also you mentioned the legacy of Disney. I'm curious about how you think that Disney has remained so culturally relevant, how it's been so innovative in terms of technology, but it's able to really stay true to its legacy.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great to be back here. I think, some of it has to do with really smart, kind of forward-looking leadership, or, really having folks in the cockpit seat, if you will, that can not only understand the past legacy, and understand the heritage of Walt and Roy and all the different interests. There's a board involved that's always been very, very, very careful as well. But, really, looking at what the current landscape is and figuring out how to put all those platforms and tentacles together. I think, Disney is in a pretty rare and unique position where, over the years, the term synergy was probably overused when media mergers are put together. But this is, in my view, probably the only giant, entertainment enterprise where it actually means something. Because that, whether it's Mickey or Snow White or some of the other properties, can really play out all across the board, whether it's streaming or I'd even go back to things like consumer products. So it's that's a big part of the equation, whether it was Eisner back in the day, and I think the strategy has got Mr. Iger's stamp all over it. So it's been a very, very smart strategy, and you're seeing a lot of it play out with streaming, at least in the Western media. But there's parks, there's cruises, and there's a lot of pieces to this enterprise, and it's about smart leadership and properties that play across those platforms.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities for Disney over the next few years?
There's a lot, because it's a big company. I mean, we haven't talked about sports, but ESPN used to be an enormous flagship back in the day of the 80s and 90s, and I think they're doing their part to kind of have a smart strategy for that. I think whether that's events or sports rights, that's always going to be a really big piece of what they're doing. When I travel the world, I always see the appetite for Disney. It's an American property, and I think it resonates with families everywhere. And so, you're seeing the park announcement in Abu Dhabi, supported by local partners as well. That piece of it is always going to be a big picture piece of it to me. And then, the obvious stuff is just digital streaming. They've done a pretty wonderful job with the app, with Disney Plus, and it's really up there with Netflix and Prime, and the rest are kind of, also ran, sorry to put it so bluntly. But I think that however they play that out, whether they're going to split sports off separately, or maybe they'll merge in other vehicles to it, but they've got these core properties. They've got all those studios you mentioned at the top of the segment here, whether it's Pixar or Marvel. And, this is a model for how a Hollywood studio system ought to be run in this day and age.
And as we noted, we're just about out of time, but they have a whole bunch of Emmy nominations. So they're not just creating content, but they're creating content that people like.
They've got tons of stuff. The Bear is a big favorite of mine. I mean, an entity like this that's so big, of course, you're going to see a lot of nominations, but I don't underplay it. They're a magnet for creative talent as well. People want to work for them, whatever the channel is. So it's a very smart, diverse strategy, and I don't know if Iger will be there forever, but I see this as a big part of his thinking, and he's really put his imprint on it in the way that Michael Eisner did in past years as well. And it's great to see it, because this will need to be carried forward into a new age, whoever the next leader is.
All right. Seth Schachner, Managing Director at Strat Americas, thank you so much for joining the show and breaking all things Disney down for us.
Great to be here.